Hello there, welcome back to my channel and a new series. So here we are with 5 weird historical facts you won't believe. Now let's get weird. Our first fact takes us back to 1796 when Napoleon Bonaparte, yes, that guy, was camping out with his army in Italy. Now, apparently he decided to take a nice little stroll through the countryside when all of a sudden a group of rabbits began attacking him. Yes, rabbits. You heard right. Apparently they came out of nowhere and began biting and scratching him. So understandably, Napoleon lost his mind and began kicking and punching the rabbits, which, yeah, would you not? But being the short, stocky guy that he was, he got tired very quickly. And although his men did come to his aid, killing many of the rabbits, there were simply too many, and they retreated after quite a few of them had gotten away. Now, what is it with rabbits in history? Because this is not the only time that these cute little fluffy things have caused some trouble. In 1932, the Australian government declared war on the European rabbit. This is what became known as the Great Emu War. And this is where hundreds of soldiers and thousands of emus went head-to-head in a battle for the ages. Or well, at least until the soldiers ran out of ammunition. It was pretty much the worst military operation in Australian history, if not also one of the weirdest. It all started in the 1850s when European settlers arrived in Australia and brought with them domestic rabbits, which soon multiplied and began destroying crops. And so the government decided to fight back. Now, don't ask me why they didn't just bring natural predators like snakes or foxes or anything, because they did eventually do that, and those predators did help reduce the population. But before then, they tried something else. First, they offered rewards for every rabbit that was killed. Then they passed laws that made it illegal to own a rabbit and even closed down businesses that sold rabbit products. But these measures weren't enough. In November of 1932, Major Meredith and his 20 soldiers set up camp near Campion and waited for the emus to arrive. They thought they were ready for anything, but boy, were they in for a surprise. As historian and author of the Emu War, Gary J. Wilson puts it, the emus came in such numbers that if they had attacked in a body, the soldiers would have been wiped out. Instead, the birds approached in small groups, selecting their targets with what seemed to be a sort of military precision. Wilson goes on to explain how the emus worked in unison, attacking from different directions and seemingly using tactics to confuse the soldiers. The military tried everything, snipers, Lewis guns, but the emus kept coming back for more. After losing thousands of birds and almost all of their ammunition, the soldiers packed up and left, calling off the war that they couldn't win. Not exactly the outcome the government had hoped for. Speaking of animals causing problems, did you know that in 1845 London was overrun by cats? That's right, cats. If you've ever seen the musical Cats, you know that felines can be pretty scary. Well, imagine hundreds of them running around your city and terrorizing the public. Yeah, not fun. In the spring of 1845, the streets of London were overtaken by feral cats. There were simply too many of them. And they were fat, healthy, and multiplying at an alarming rate. People were afraid to walk outside. Shopkeepers spent most of their days shooing cats off their counters and out of their shops. It was absolute chaos. Eventually, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals stepped in and organized a massive effort to trap, neuter, and rehome the cats. Over the course of 2 weeks, volunteers trapped 237 cats, 181 dogs, and 39 horses. Then they took the animals out into the countryside and set them free. By the end of the operation, the number of stray animals in London had been greatly reduced. All right, moving on to our next fact. President Andrew Jackson once had a pet parrot that cursed and then photobombed his funeral. Now, Andrew Jackson was a man who liked to live large. He hosted elaborate parties at his home in Tennessee and was known for his love of fine food and drink. He also loved his pet parrot. Jackson acquired the bird while he was in the White House and reportedly bought it from a sailor who had captured it in the West Indies. Unlike most parrots, this bird didn't talk much, but what it lacked in talking skills it made up for in cursing skills. Yep, this bird knew how to drop an F-bomb. Not surprisingly, the parrot became a bit of a celebrity in Washington, D.C., with people coming from all around the Capitol to see the foul-mouthed bird. Of course, being a president's pet, the parrot also attended state dinners and other official functions. often sitting on Jackson's shoulder and cursing up a storm. After Jackson died in 1845, his wife Rachel took the parrot to his funeral. It perched on her shoulder as she walked behind the coffin and then flew off, returning to the house where it spent its remaining days. All right, now we're going to travel back to medieval England for a weird historical fact that you definitely won't believe. In medieval times, animals were put on trial. That's right. From pigs to donkeys to sheep, no animal was safe from being accused of a crime and having to stand trial in court. Pigs were often put on trial for the crime of eating someone's homework. Donkeys were accused of killing flies, and sheep were even put on trial for the crime of being ugly. Of course, the animals didn't actually commit these crimes. They were just scapegoated. In fact, sometimes the animals were innocent, but people wanted to punish them anyway. Most of these trials took place in the 15th and 16th centuries during the Protestant Reformation, when people were looking for someone or something to blame for their problems. For example, in 1539, a pig named Pedigo was put on trial for eating a woman's homework. The pig was found guilty and sentenced to be drowned. In another case, a donkey was put on trial for killing flies and sentenced to be burned at the stake. Even sheep weren't safe. In 1561, a sheep was put on trial for being ugly and sentenced to be hanged. Although these trials may seem ridiculous today, they were actually a serious part of medieval history. And it wasn't until the 18th century that animals were finally given the right to remain silent. Yes, you heard me right. Urine was used as mouthwash, I know, right? But it's true. The ancient Romans believed that urine had a number of health benefits, including for your teeth and gums. In fact, they used it so often that they even had a special container for carrying it around. The urine was also used as a cleaning agent, a disinfectant, and even a perfume. To the ancient Romans, urine was basically a miracle substance. But why did they use urine as mouthwash? Well, it turns out that urine is actually a good way to kill bacteria. In fact, scientists have found that urine contains a compound called urea that has antibacterial properties. Urea is found in both human and animal urine, so the Romans weren't the only ones who used it as mouthwash. Nowadays, we obviously don't use urine as mouthwash, but maybe we should. After all, it's natural and it works. Alright, that's it for this episode. Let me know your favorite fact in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode.